This is a scary story about Mr. Rabbit. Um, and I'm just going to warn you, if you're the kind of person that, somebody tells you a scary story and you have bad dreams, I say just don't even listen to this story. This all happened when I was a kid. I was about 10 years old. Um, there was a street in my neighborhood that was the scariest street in my neighborhood. And poor people lived there. I mean, my family, we didn't have very much money either, but this was really poor people. I mean, a lot of these houses on this street, they were the next thing to shacks. And the reason was is because it was really a low-lying street. My family, we lived up higher on the hill. And down there where they lived, that would flood. That was before the levee ever got built. And every couple of years, spring, the thaw and the creek would back up and that whole area would flood. All those houses would get flooded. So nobody would live there, but really, really, poor people who could not afford anything better. That's the only people who actually lived there. Um, I didn't like to go on that street because there was a lot of scary kids that lived on that street. And man, if they got a hold of you, man, they might beat you up or something. But I had a friend named Ray, and Ray lived on that street. So if I wanted to go visit him, I was going to have to sneak onto that street. So once in a while, I'd be on that street. There was one house on this street, and it was always considered the most terrifying house on the terrifying street, and that's where Mr. Rabbit lived. And the house itself was scary looking. It was this really ugly dark green color, and it had probably like battleship green, and it had been painted, I don't know, 50 years before and never repainted, so all the paint was sort of peeling, and the whole house looked like it had some kind of hideous skin disease or leprosy or something like that. I didn't even like to look at the house, and it had a funny smell. The whole house had this kind of rancid, stinky smell, and people said Mr. Rabbit had killed people and buried them in the backyard, and that was the smell. And kids, this is the kind of stuff kids would say. Um, Mr. Rabbit was unforgettable if the way he looked. He was this old guy, and he was fat. He had big, you know, obscenely obese belly, like he'd been drinking, kegs of beer for the last 40, 50 years. And he always wore the same shirt. It was like a strap undershirt, like old men wear, real tight around that great big huge belly. And people said he'd been wearing that same shirt for like 20 years. I mean, he slept in that shirt, and it was stained. And man, you didn't want to get anywhere near him. Ray's sister said that those stains were blood stains, and he had like killed kids who dared to sneak into his backyard, and he was proud of that. And if we snuck into his backyard, he'd kill us too, and there would be more stains on that horrible shirt, and it'd be our blood. Our blood would be on that shirt. Oh, he had a big white beard, like a Santa Claus beard, except it was all dirty and tangled. And it was like, Santa Claus had this, insane and evil brother, uh, and he was living there on our street. And he didn't inherit any of the jolly genes, as good as Santa Claus is. Mr. Rabbit was like the opposite, of that. Well, the reason we called him Mr. Rabbit, it wasn't his real name, but we called him Mr. Rabbit because in his backyard he had pens, rabbit pens. He kept these rabbits back there. And Mr. Rabbit ate rabbits. Um, we were not farm kids. We were not used to animals being butchered and eaten. Our parents, we all ate meat, but our parents went to the grocery store, as God intends. People had seen Mr. Rabbit killing the rabbits. He'd do it right out in the backyard. Apparently, he'd grab a rabbit, by the head and twirl it around like that until its neck broke, crack. And then he had a knife, and he'd cut around the fur around the neck, and then he'd just peel the skin right off the rabbit like you were peeling, I don't know, like tights off of a kid. Or something like that. And Ray's sister told us if he ever caught us, that's what he'd do to us. He'd skin us, he'd just pull, it's kind of terrifying. Um, Ray decided we should save those rabbits. And this is like, what is the insane? Oh, did I tell you about the dog? Mr. Rabbit had a dog. He didn't even have a real name. He just called him Dog. A big black dog. It was like some kind of Labrador gone wrong. And he was always chained up there. Winter, spring, summer, fall. Dog is always out there. He's always on that chain. And if you get anywhere near the fence, dog knows you're there. He had some kind of like super dog senses. I don't know how he could see through the fence, but I mean, like maybe he could hear your little heartbeat or something like that, or maybe he'd smell your little terrified sweat, but he'd start barking and howling, and you couldn't even get anywhere near it. So when Ray said we're going to save those rabbits, how are we going to do that? How are we ever going to get past dog? Ray said, don't worry about it, and so what I did was. I told my mom I was going to spend the night, not with Ray. I mean, there's no way in hell my mom would have let me spend the night at Ray's house. And Ray's dad was this crazy alcoholic, even let kids in the house anyway, So I told my mom I was going to, this religious kid that she liked, I didn't like this kid, but my mom liked him. And I'm going to go spend the night at his house, So really, I spent the night with Ray. And our plan was we just stay up all night, And if we really got tired, Ray's mom owned a truck. We could sleep in that truck if all else failed. And Ray had a plan about dog. What Ray said he had been doing for like every night that week was he stole lunch meat and bacon, and he would go to that fence and he'd throw the meat over the fence, and dog got that meat and ate that meat, and now he was no longer barking. When Ray would get close to that fence, he was no longer barking. He's making these little whiny noises because we believed that maybe he had never really had anything but rabbit meat to eat, and he just loved this apparently lunch meat and bacon. So and Ray's, when we got there, we're like in an alley behind the fence, and I can kind of hear dog over there inside the yard. It's a dark night, but it's not that dark. It's just like moonlight, and there's fireflies out summer night, and Ray throws some meat over it. And then he gives me like a whole package of lunch meat, and he boosts me over the fence. And so it's not really till I'm like coming over the fence, all of a sudden I realize, oh my God, I mean, I'm going to be the first one over and I'm in the yard now, and there's a dog. And the plan is that I'm supposed to throw. I can stay back by the fence, and I'll be outside the range of the chain, and I throw some lunch meat to dog and eats it, and I'll throw him another piece, and this will allow Ray's big enough that he can get over the fence, and then he'll go and save those rabbits, and I'll be kind of dealing out pieces of lunch meat and keeping dog occupied so Ray can do this. But what happens is I get so terrified that I ended up throwing the whole damn package of meat to dog, and dog is just like wolfing it down, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen? And I think I see a light on in the house, and maybe Mr. Rabbit is awake and he's peeing or something, and he's got a shotgun in there, and I'm way back by the fence, and I want to yell at Ray, and Ray he gets the doors open on the rabbit pens, and then he's like, whisper, I gotta come here, and dog's like finishing up the meat, and it turns out the rabbits are so damn big that Ray wants me to like help him get the rabbits out. So I get up there and we're like hauling these are huge rabbits. I'm just a kid. They to me they seem like they're 300-pound rabbits, and we're hauling them out and dropping them in the grass, and dog's finishing up the meat, and he's kind of interested. He's sort of looking at us, but he's not really doing anything. And I see this light on in the house, and the damn rabbits, I think they're going to just run, aren't they? I mean, they're free, you're free, but they just sit there in the grass, and they're looking around like they're drugged. And Ray says, they're like old convicts, they're so used to being in prison that they don't even know how to hop. And Ray says we're going to have to like pick them up and get them over the fence, get them into the alley, maybe I don't know, we'll take care of them for the next 20 years, but we'll save them from Mr. Rabbit. And so I'm trying to pick up this giant rabbit. The rabbit freaks out, and it all of a sudden it's peeing on me. It's like pooping. I've got like rabbit diarrhea running down my arms, and all of a sudden the rabbit lets out a scream. I really had no idea that rabbits can scream. It lets out a scream like it's a demon-possessed rabbit, and I just drop it, and I think I hear the door opening and Mr. Rabbit's coming out, and I just go over the fence. I didn't even have to have Ray help me, and I'm running down the alley, and I fall. I skin my elbows, and Ray's with me, and we're like 2 blocks away, and and Ray's yelling at me, "Will you shut up? Will you stop screaming?" It wasn't until then that I realized that was me that was bellowing. That was me that was screaming, that whole way. After that, I had dreams. I think death, death. I think death is nothing like his pictures. When people picture death, they always show you this kind of tall skeleton, and he's all wrapped up in this like huge bathrobe with a cowl, and he's got a scythe in his bony hand. I think death is Mr. Rabbit. For years, I had dreams about Mr. Rabbit chasing me, bellowing, throwing 300-pound rabbits at me. The truth is, sometimes I still dream about Mr. Rabbit. I hope you never dream about Mr. Rabbit, but I did warn you.